Welcome, listeners, to the Traveler Chronicles, where the enchanting world of Extraeus comes to life. I'm Dungeon Master Eguile, your guide through the pivotal scenes in our thrilling Dungeons & Dragons homebrew campaign. Join us as we embark on adventures with the Travelers, a diverse group of heroes, each with their own unique reason for traveling the world. Together we'll explore the rich lore and vibrant landscapes of Extraeus, filled with magic, mystery, and unforgettable moments. And don't miss out on our special segment, Traveler's Tidings with Luna, where reporter Luna, played by my wonderful wife, DNDWife, interviews intriguing characters from our world, bringing their stories to life in delightful, immersive conversations. Whether you're a seasoned dungeon master seeking inspiration or a newcomer eager to dive into a fantastical journey, the Traveler Chronicles has something for everyone. So grab your gear and prepare for adventure. The world of Extraeus awaits. Welcome back, adventurers, to another episode of the Traveler Chronicles. I'm your host, DM Eguile, joined as always by my co-host and partner in crime, DNDWife.
Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into a special moment in our campaign, the first solo adventure for our favorite mischievous Mirren, Bog Bean.
That's right, we'll be breaking down what happens when a player steps into the spotlight alone, how that can shape their journey, and the unforgettable training session with Hunza, the leader of the Mirr'sha people. Plus, we'll have a special on-the-ground report from Luna and an interview with Bog Bean's player at Link.
Stick around, adventurers, because this is going to be a fun one. And don't forget, if you love the show, leave us a review and join our Discord to chat about all things Traveler Chronicles.
Now, I imagine other DMs might have other concepts of what I call the spotlight.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of most people would assume, like, theater kids is obviously a moment when a particular character takes kind of the central focus. A lot of times for me, though, what makes the difference is usually this character is alone. And a lot of times when I refer to that kind of moment, you know, those moments where it's either, you know, 1 to 2 players, it's kind of hard with depending on how big your groups are or how small your groups are. But it typically is like that time where the character is really leading the story. The other players kind of fade into the background.
Yeah, they do their own thing a little bit.
Right. And that player is allowed to kind of have the central focus of the story to do kind of whatever they might want to be, whether it's to get up to some, you know, shenanigans or maybe dig deeper into their backstory. But I also find that it's important, too, because it really allows for secretive kind of actions, right? So if you're like, you know, it's hard to play on a 6-person table if, like, you're trying to hide an effect or you're trying to do something, but it's like, okay, but the crew's always around. So how do I get moments where, yes, I'm surrounded by 5 other people. I can never, without like having them leave the room. You know, this isn't Critical Role, but I mean, how do you create moments where at least it does feel like there's a time for the player to have a moment to themselves?
Yeah, it's tough, especially when, like you said, there are a bunch of other people sitting right at the table while you're trying to be on your own. It's kind of weird.
Right. And another the biggest problem, though, is that it is something that's not just there, right? It's not like, you know, there's a red light that suddenly appears in front of you and you're like, oh, the camera's on me. It's my turn to shine. So, you know, it's a really hard thing for, you know, especially new players to feel comfortable with. I mean, when you're playing like this team sport, you don't want to be the one that's like, you know, shining above all the rest, because then it's like, okay, now everyone is just doing this person's story. And if that spotlight is only on one person, they're like, okay, well, we're playing the campaign of this person. We're not necessarily playing, main character syndrome, right? So it's really important, you know. And so, like, for ours, it was this kind of important moment, which is what really set out for me, was that this was an opportunity for one of our new players. And when I say new, I mean completely new. This was only maybe 4 or 5 sessions into their brand new D&D, you know, playing Legacy. So, I mean, you know, it was kind of one of those things where on my end, it was, okay, I know that this person isn't going to necessarily jump into the spotlight. So I was going to have to find a way to kind of nudge them into it. Because as a new person, you're never really just going to, I mean, unless you're that kind of player and you want to like be in front of everything, you know, the typical
star.
bard.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be hard for especially a new person to know when. Oh, this is the time. Okay, now let me do my thing.
Yeah.
And so it was really kind of important because I know how big of an impact these moments can have. I mean, yeah, you're part of a group, but you always want to feel special every now and then. I mean,
little personal moments.
your characters have had multiple different kind of moments like that.
Oh yeah, all sorts of poignant moments, whether they're sad, happy, excitement, all sorts of different things have happened to make my character specifically have a little special, feeling.
Yeah, I think like some of the ones, you know, especially for like campaign 1 was like moments with Alira and Caladrax, right? Like even though it's 2 people, it was moments where they were alone off on their, even though we're all sitting there, we're all here. But
We'd flown off somewhere.
Right, it allowed for more character development that probably wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yeah, there were times where Alira went off by herself into her own mansion. And the other characters did the same to their own little places too. It wasn't just one. And we've done that throughout the campaigns as well. We've all kind of taken our times.
I mean, some of the prime examples, especially from campaign 1, are like the shenanigans of Milo, right? So that was a person who loved taking the spotlight.
Yeah.
Right? He would always try to get into those because he was our thief and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So
I
he
love
always
those.
But so many hilarious moments where I think it got to the point where you guys were like, oh, please put the spotlight on Milo because we're just going to sit back and watch it all go, just shit up because everything is going to go bad.
Oh, yeah. And then he got to the point where he was so powerful, it was like, oh, what's about to go down?
Yeah, and I think, too, is also, it's important on like how long that light stays, right? Just like if you've ever been through, after a while, you're blind. Like, you can't see anything.
You can't have it on
because
forever.
It's been on you so long. And sometimes you can inadvertently create main character syndrome.
You can.
I've seen this in sometimes where, it's like you try to be like, okay, this town is very significant for one player. They know it.
Yeah.
Which means they're now going to be like, well, if I drag it out, I know that this is everything about my character.
Right.
And so they might now think, okay, well, this might be my only time to get this. So they're going to draw it out and go a little too much and a little too long.
Yeah.
So you got to find that balance. And so I always try to be where it's like scenes, right? Like you have a scene. You don't have a session of a spotlight, but you get various scenes. And so that's really what we wanted to look today with this particular episode as we got really our first really solo scene. And of course, as in true D&D fashion, it's a training montage scene,
the best kind.
And so, for that, it was also, solo opportunities for me in the spotlight are also ways for me as a DM to kind of work with the players on particular things they might be lacking or needing help with, right?
Okay.
This character has a problem role playing, right? They don't really know how to interact. Okay, well, guess what? They're now stuck in some place alone where they have to rely on their role play.
Yeah.
Forcing them to kind of dive head first. And that's kind of the fun. And so, especially with new players, there's a lot to learn in terms of like how to fight and how to play the game because when you have infinite options, that can be very stressful.
A little bit.
And so at this point, we had a couple rounds of combat. And so, the character Bog Bean is our barbarian, right? Like, is our fighter.
Right in front.
And what I found is, a lot of early, especially, novice and rookie players, they just go, oh, I'm a barbarian. I smash.
Yeah,
that's what I do. I get to hit a couple of times.
No personality. Cool. I don't do anything.
And so you want to kind of give them an opportunity where it's like, hey, no, there's so much you can do, but until you're kind of shown it, you never really think about it yourself. But at the same time, because unless another player in your party is also a barbarian, which is highly unlikely unless you're playing a themed campaign, you're never going to see what like another true barbarian does. So it's like, okay, well, how am I supposed to learn? So that's where like these spotlights come in. It's like, hey, why don't we have like a technical one-on-one training session with the DM and player under the guise of this like story moment?
Yeah, and it's important to remember, like, we're not actors, right? Coming into a role-playing game, we're not trained professionals. We're not here to put on a show. So knowing these cues doesn't come naturally to most of us coming into these games. So having the time or having a special like moment set aside to kind of learn what those cues are in a story beat really helps.
Yeah, and so I really wanted to take the opportunity with this scene to really build into the character. So just to set this up is prior to the character, Etlink making Bog Bean, she kind of built a backstory, right? And as all players do. Now I preferenced, and some of my veteran players spoke to my rookie players and were like, close the door. Do not leave parents, family members slightly alive. If they're dead, you buried the body specifically, so the body is gone. The body was seen. You make sure, because if there is any crack, this DM will get you.
Yeah.
And so it was a fairly strong backstory to avoid, and it was designed to avoid the standard like parents tropes,
right? Siblings.
But there was still, and what is always funny about Dungeons and Dragons is that there's no way to get out of it.
Nope.
And so with building this motif, this was the first time that I think Etlink and Bog Bean realized, oh shit, I'm way more connected to this story than I ever thought.
Yeah, I thought I was just floating around out here, but
yeah, like,
oh,
I have a sword,
people.
I met this person, cool. And then, it's revealed that this sword is super important and that this woman that she was kind of adopted by is also very important.
Yeah.
And she had no clue. And it even gets revealed later on how even more important this connection gets, which we'll get down later.
Yeah.
But it just shows how these are just really opportunities to, you don't have to go like, oh, your long lost father or your mother you thought was dead. No, there are so many ways that you can play off of, just whether it's a trinket or somebody that, they happen to be, raised by, but they're not family, all kinds of ways.
I was even about to say, it doesn't even have to be a person. It could be an object, something that reminds you, that brings you back or something, or has something in there, to show you the way.
Right. And I think that was a big turning point for the player because it was more of like, not only is the DM kind of like reading my backstory and knowing what's going on, but it was like, oh man, I never would have thought this was also including me. I just thought, until it's something specific about my character, it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah,
and
I don't have to pay attention.
No, every little string of fate that can kind of connect people. And as the story progresses, we start finding even more of these little strings that kind of go to and from the various characters.
Yep.
And this was just one step.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, I think, also a sign that they kind of realized that they were going to have more of an impact to the story. When you're a new player, I imagine most of it's like, okay, well, there's all these veteran players. They're going to be like these grandiose things.
Right. I'm just going to chill.
I'm going to chill in the background. I'm going to learn the game. I'm going to be cool, right?
Yeah.
But this was more of where it kind of showed, the new players that they were just as important, if not a bigger part of the story, because unbeknownst to them with the species they picked and the other things, there was so much more going on. But the way it always opens up, it was really great because a lot of the opening of the scene and a lot of the dynamic is related to the idea of taking the spotlight.
A little bit, yeah.
So we open with the whole idea of that Bog Bean, wakes up late and it was supposed to meet at dawn, but didn't, right? And the funny thing is that obviously with a story, how does this happen? But in reality, it was Etlink trying to find the right opportunity to kind of go off from the party.
Yeah.
As well as this idea of, I mean, I'm a DM. I don't run into this, so you might have to clarify more on this. But I mean, the idea of like, I'm going to go alone.
Yeah.
And everyone in this table has told me never go out alone.
Don't split the party.
And at this point in the story, which was what a big deal, is that throughout the entirety of the campaign so far, Bog Bean has never been without Bricky.
Yeah.
For the most part.
But Bricky was missing at this point, I think.
This was when Bricky was missing. So it was also the first time that Etlink, the player, was also playing the game entirely solo because Eric wasn't actually even at the table.
Her mentor wasn't here, yeah.
So it was even more of this like double kind of tag of both Etlink and Bog Bean being nervous of going out on their own to find this person who at the beginning didn't really seem like they wanted much from her to begin with.
Yeah, and on top of that, the story's all about you, so let's focus all on you today.
And that really what it came to, because this was the introduction of Hunza, who was this very large Mirr'sha woman who was just almost like riddled with scars, but had this kind of sense of authority to her. And at the time, you guys learned that she is kind of this like acting kind of leader to the Mirr'sha people.
Yeah, not quite a chieftain, but very close, like a elder.
Yeah, we'll refer to as the Grand Battle Maiden.
Yeah.
And so, it was this kind of like very stern person that, in very much contrast to Bog Bean's very carefree personality, which is kind of why Hunza had that personality. I kind of tailored it to thinking that essentially whatever Bog Bean was, she would be the opposite.
That makes sense.
To kind of represent that, like, so if Bog Bean was more organized, she'd be more aloof to kind of counter that kind of personality.
A little looser.
Because they are kind of, in a way, surrogate siblings in a way of like how Hunza idolized Hebe, and now here's technically like someone who actually met her in person, whereas Hunza's only learned of her through through stories. So you have this kind of person that is very much a strong fighter, and at this point in the story, Bog Bean's been in like a fight and a half.
Yeah, not much combat experience at this point.
And the big thing too, which was the idea, was that Hunza had seen that in all of the fights, Bog Bean mostly was very feral, using her claws or her teeth.
Whatever was at hand.
Never using the finesse of the weapon.
Yeah.
And when she did, it was much more of like swinging a tree stump rather than swinging this sword. And so it was this kind of idea of giving Bog Bean her first test of just, your rage ain't gonna cut it.
Yeah, it's not always gonna save you.
And so the great thing that always started me with this is that, as soon as the kind of acceptance of training happened, Hunza like initially just reacts by like essentially doing a sucker gut punch to Bog Bean, essentially rendering her like a little down for a moment.
Right. Lesson number 1, never let your guard down.
Pretty much, right? And this idea of that this is somebody who knows what they're doing. It's not even the idea of honor, because that is not something the Mirren have. It's survival. And this was kind of interesting because it also showed really the abilities of the Mirr'sha in the fact that she was leaping from tree to tree. So for those of you who don't know, Bog Bean is this very small little goblinoid creature who already has height problems to begin with. And so as you have this like able-bodied cat person who is leaping from tree to tree, she was trying to find new ways of kind of combat. And she was constantly being reminded to find her own path, and that she shouldn't just be mimicking others, because in essence, with the path of the barbarian that Bog Bean was, she could mimic the physical traits of other creatures.
Specifically the other swamp creatures she had grown up around.
Right, and so here's Hunza, a weapons expert, who is trying to teach Bog Bean to use the tools of her trade.
The sword she has is more than just a tree stump. You can do things with it.
It took a while and a lot of HP as Bog Bean is just basically getting pelted left and right. Not by very damaging blows, but essentially death by 1,000 cuts.
A little bit.
Until she finally kind of starts recognizing and using, which was also incidentally some inventions made by Drexla, to allow her to kind of overcome this trial by giving her more range by throwing her sickle and kind of trying to pinpoint and time these strikes.
Work smarter, not harder.
Right. And so it really kind of created this new kind of connection. And after kind of proving herself worthy, unfortunately, I really wouldn't call it a win between the two of them. More of like a draw. As much as Hunza kind
or at least not a loss.
It's that whole like stop the fight Rocky moment right before like the final blow could have been done, so that no one can truly say if they won or lost. But it really is this identity, and the fun thing too, as a side point, is that this was also another mechanic that was in the game.
Yeah, true.
And this was the kind of dividing point for Bog Bean, is she had two options for combat. One that was more of like a feral, and one that was more of a finesse using her weapons. And so it was interesting to see what she chose from the training to take, in which she chose more of the finesse, which gained her more abilities using the weapons rather than her own physical form.
That's something cool to fall back on, if you're in a, cornered up against a wall, but when you really need to go all out, you need that finesse, you need to know what you're doing.
And then because of the nature of the spotlight, it did give Bog Bean an opportunity to like ask some questions about what exactly was this weapon, who was Hebe, and she got a lot of that extra backstory, though, even though obviously it was part of her own, this was me generating it for her character. But it allowed her now to kind of have that time where obviously no one else is going to interrupt her, and she can ask the questions. So she learned a lot more about what initially was just a quick character in her backstory, now evolved into this much deeper character, as well as this now invite for more training, more knowledge, and a pseudo connection to another tribe. And so it was kind of this interesting thing because then you have, Bog Bean riddled to shit with cuts and stuff, returning back to camp after a few hours just with a grin, a big old grin across her face. Just knowing
beat
of
to
this,
hell, but having the fun of her life.
Because to me, it was a moment for both the character and the player, right? Even the player was smiling at the end of this because it was this idea of that, I am not only just a player, but I'm a part of this story. This story is evolving not only around me, but with me as well.
Yeah, I'm alive in the world.
Yeah, and so it really kind of set aside that it wasn't going to be essentially a veteran party and that these people with their elegant 80-page backstories, I'm talking to you, Eric, it is something that it allows everyone to get that moment, and then easily once it was done, it's okay. They're back in the crowd, and now they're with everybody, and the light kind of waits for the next person to move into it.
Yeah, I quite like that. That's very nice.
So it was always a really important scene because it really was our first solo kind of training montage arc, which I always love in D&D. But needless to say, it was the first where one character was completely alone.
Yeah.
And for it to be one of our newer players rather than you or my other veterans,
right? We would know what to do.
I think it also set a pace for the fact that it also held you veterans up to a new standard, in that you were going to have to play even harder because everybody was really into this new world and the possibilities that could come from it.
Yeah, I think we learned we couldn't afford to be too careful with our characters. We had to really play into who we were, and if that meant being a little more reckless, and that's what we had to do.
And I think that also showed that there were more opportunities where it's like, okay, if you want to learn more, you got to risk it a little.
Yeah.
And that's really what I
Nothing's
think.
free.
And I think that's what the spotlight should be, because obviously if everyone's focused on you, you are the focus, which means that could be the focus of good and that could be the focus of bad.
It's not always the best eyes on you.
But, I feel like the best thing we could do is maybe get a little bit of, the words from Bog Bean herself. I imagine Luna's probably there, as she can give us a little more of what exactly went down in her training.
Sure. Let's tune in. Luna, can you hear us? Welcome, everybody, to Traveler Tidings. I'm your host, Luna, here with Bog Bean. Hello, little one.
Hi, Luna.
Welcome. You look like you just lost a fight with a tree. Are you all right?
It was okay. I had training with Hunza this morning, and it was rough. I kind of did fight a tree, actually.
I was about to say, it looks like the tree was moving, too.
Yeah, I got hit a bunch of times, but I learned a whole lot of things.
Oh, well, that's lovely. I can tell you seem a little more confident. You've got a big old smile on your face despite all the cuts and bruises.
The cuts and bruises were also fun, but Hunza told me a lot about Hebe, and she kind of reminds me of Hebe sometimes, and because she's kind of mean.
Oh.
But I like it. It's okay.
A little strict. But you need a little bit of structure, I like that. But, I see you've been training hard. You definitely look the part. What was the hardest part of training?
The hardest part was because she was up in the tree.
Did she make you run laps up there?
I didn't want to be in the tree, so I had to find some other way to hit her.
Oh, that makes sense. What did you do?
Drexla made a little bracelet for my sickle, and it maybe I could throw it a bunch of times.
Oh, and
so
it could come back to you, so you didn't have to go get it all the time.
I kept throwing it, and then I had to, my hand, what's it called? Hand-eye coordination. I had to catch it, and then I had to throw it again.
Oh, dear. Well, you still look, even despite all the challenges, you look like you had a blast. And you always seem to have a smile on your face, which is lovely. But to be honest, was there a time that you wanted to quit?
A little bit. It kind of made me mad. But I could use my mad to fight, but I also need to look past it to fight better. And I think that's what Hunza's going to teach me.
Maybe focus it into specific anger.
Yeah. So she said I could always come back for more training. And she's a great warrior for the Mirr'sha. And maybe I could do that someday.
Oh, you want to be a part of the tribe, perhaps? That's lovely.
Yes, I would like that so much, to be part of something like Hebe was. Maybe that's where she came from, and I could learn more.
Oh, we would certainly have to explore that. I mean, we are here on vacation. We could certainly, check it out. But what does this training mean for you? Are you going to, really try to maybe permanently be part of the Mirr'sha?
I don't know, because I haven't done it for so long, but I do like traveling with you guys. You guys are like another family almost to me so far. But I think I would like to give back, maybe protect more people.
Yes.
And I would like to be stronger for that. And not just, I usually am like, rah, bam. But I could be better than that.
A little more focus, perhaps. I love that. I love that ideal, Bog Bean. And I'm certain that we could perhaps maybe create a roving, traveling band of people that go around protecting. I quite like that. I'd like to travel with you. It'd be super fun, I think.
Yay! I'm so glad you say that.
I think so. Well, I look forward to future adventures with you, Bog Bean, but I'll let you go and get maybe a little patched up here. You look a little rough.
Yeah, I'm going to go take a bath.
Yeah, maybe ask Tobias for a little help, yeah?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
Tobias!
All right. Well, bye. Well, I'm joined here by Entling. Thank you so much, Entling, for joining us as Bog Bean walks off here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun.
Well, this was your first solo adventure. That's got to be a little daunting there. Well, how nervous were you stepping into this spotlight?
So daunting. And I was definitely nervous. Little less nervous than the session 1 opening on me, but it was rivaling there for sure.
Oh dear. True. You'd been through the worst part of it, at least.
Yeah, like I had a taste of it, but now it's different because we're actually kind of, it's not leading into something necessarily like it, but this time it was totally just my own side story kind of.
Absolutely.
And, having to rely on just like the RP was just between me and the DM and having to kind of, like, I was never going to speak up for that moment for myself.
Right.
So it was a learning experience to be like guided to be like, okay, you're doing this training and you woke up late. So naturally Bog Bean, and honestly for me as a player in
you're
that
panicky.
You panic, you're making like the split decision, which is arguably what you want in D&D setting. But like, so I was just like, oh my God, I'm late. I'm running, I'm booking. And like, I remember even at the table where I think it was Tobias who was like, do you want anyone to come with you? Oh, she's gone. She's already gone.
Yeah. Okay, well, bye. That's interesting. But, I understand you went off in a hurry, but what surprised you the most about how DM Eguile handled this moment, besides waking up late?
I think it was definitely, like, there was a bit of a learning curve because I think he introduced it like, oh, you see this humanoid person or a figure like in the distance doing something, and I was like, humanoid, I'm looking for a cat person, like, and then I had to learn that where it's like, okay, in D&D anything that's kind of like bipedal
is a humanoid.
Anthropomorphic, that's still humanoid. So that was
you had to learn the
interesting
lingo a little bit.
So like I think the way that the scene was introduced and kind of like keeping both Bog Bean and myself on my toes because of the, like, I guess non-linear or unexpected training tactics, like with the sucker punch and stuff. It was like always on my toes. I always I didn't know necessarily like a script to fall back on, like a tropey thing to fall back on.
Well, that's a good thing, I think, because then it means you're more authentically your character and yourself. So I like that.
Totally,
very good.
I would agree.
And this training was, I think, a really big deal for Bog Bean. So far, you've been a very bubbly sort of person, despite a little bit of the rah going on. But how did this training sort of change how you see Bog Bean as a character?
I think it was more like she was very jokey. And still is very jokey, but she kind of has to now grapple with a seriousness of she could choose at this point in the story to carry on this legacy or to investigate more about who her mentor actually was, like, or the history of where she landed herself in the Moonbright. Like
how she ended up there.
Yeah, so instead of taking things necessarily for granted, she's more and more seeing like the wide world for what it is, and things are more connected, I think.
And, the opportunities it brings. Oh, I love that. The sort of possibilities that exist out there, and the adventures that they could bring. I quite like that.
Taking things a little more seriously.
And now that you've had this solo moment, the nerves have sort of worn off a little bit. Do you feel a little more comfortable stepping into these bigger story moments? Let's say you had to spend a little more time in the spotlight.
I think so. I think it would still be nerve-wracking depending on what the situation is, because like something so serious, you might feel like without the input of the other people at the table. Like maybe you're
true.
making a big decision that could affect them or something like that. So I think it would depend on the context for me, but I would definitely love to have like training with Hunza again, you know, stuff like that. I really like those kind of lore heavy moments.
I do see that, right? Because there is that balance, and you don't know if you're doing something that's going to be impacting the other people at the table, so you don't want to do too much. I totally understand that. But if you had to describe Bog Bean's training in 3 words, what would they be?
Brutal,
Ooh.
exciting, and unexpected.
Oh, I like that. Learned a lot, and it wasn't something you were looking
like
to
all the harshness is for a reason. I think Bog Bean, being as lighthearted as she is, she can see why Hunza is the way that she is, and it's important in its own way.
Oh, the tough love is really there. I quite like that. But thank you so much for joining me today, Entling, and of course, thank you to Bog Bean for joining us as well. That was lovely.
Thank you.
I have been Luna signing off. Back to you, D&D wife and DM Eguile. Oh, well, thank you so much, Luna, for that awesome report. We look forward to your next one.
I always love that. But as always, this is kind of a new section that we have started up on Traveler Chronicles for the new year.
Yeah.
Introducing our round table where we are being joined by Entling herself, joining
Welcome
us
to
as
the
well,
table.
still here.
Glad to be here.
This is just a period where we're just going to break it down, where if you guys have any questions or anything, just going a little bit more into the scene with the person who was in the scene themselves. But I think the biggest thing is, I think is like, what was your expectation? And, we got the reality, we know that, but really, what were you thinking when you got into that?
I think in a very uncreative way, I assumed that it was going to be like, this is a cool technique, and I'm going to teach you this technique.
Yeah,
and yada yada,
right,
like Naruto and all that.
I was trying to avoid, like the blatant where it's like it's either going to be off screen, or it was just going to be a series of rolls.
Yeah,
because I feel like that's the other thing that most DMs will do. It's like, oh, training arc, okay, you're going to roll like 15 times, and we'll add some numbers, and we'll say X, Y, Z.
Yeah, and we'll see how well you did.
Versus, like, I wanted it to be like a scenario. Like, I wanted it, not only that, but I think one of the bigger worries, and it was more of, which you don't know this because Etlink, you're a new person, but like one-on-one combat is fearful in D&D, right? Especially depending on what classes. Now, a barbarian, different story.
Oh yeah, you can handle yourself.
If like campaign 1's Caladrax was in an early one-on-one battle, it'd be over.
Yeah,
right?
wizard,
it's a
no
wizard,
way.
right? So it's that thought of like, it was the first time also in our campaign where it was a one-on-one battle, and given the sucker punch to start, I think that really gave the placard of she might kill you.
Yeah,
she might be so mad at what you've done, and you might be so bad that she will just choose to end you instead.
She might just want to take the sword and go.
Like, did you ever think that you could potentially have lost Bog Bean?
Yeah,
I think as such a new player, I wouldn't even I think, like, as you said, like, I don't even know to fear that at this point. So I'm just like,
true.
what does that feel like? Like, what is the, oh, no, like, you just get,
I'll
like,
just roll
Baldur's
another
Gate,
one.
I just get revivified, it's fine.
Like, not realizing you're level 2 at this point.
Yeah, nobody has that shit.
For real.
Yeah, and I mean, that was just kind of, it was more of obviously letting you get an opportunity, but also kind of showing the other players, like, hey, anything can happen.
Yeah. And to anyone, too, nobody's safe.
But I think for me, this was an important part for as a DM, and also showing, which is why the scene is important, of how DMs can also not just have to be like, okay, Entlink, let's talk outside the game. Okay, here's how you need to play. Here's how, let's do a review.
Yeah.
Instead of doing it in game. So the whole point was also teaching, you, Entlink, a little more of like, hey, combat is way more open to you. You just got to think of outside the box of just swing or scratch. And I think that was the big point of like the whole it being distance and all that. It was like, okay, she has to think out of the box. It's like, will she destroy the trees? Will she try to rage climb? Will she just keep throwing rocks or something?
Yeah.
And all of those were an open option, but at least limited. It wasn't infinite options.
Yeah. No, it definitely helped that it was like, I'm confined to the space and confined to just my stuff. And I don't have like the legacy player, that my buddy character, to be helping me with it. It was just all me. And it was nice to kind of get that done in game, because I'm a more like hands-on learner anyways. Like to learn something, I have to like do it myself. And so I do think that was like a smart way to go about it, versus because if it was just like a verbal aside between like people,
might not have stuck in there.
I wouldn't. Yeah, like it may have stuck, but I wouldn't even know like how to go about it, or it'd be like, I don't know, maybe like
what leads up to this.
Way.
Yeah, I get you. And running through the steps, I think really helps too, because as a new player, you had only been in combat like we said, 1.5 times at that point. We really had not had any experience. So the one-on-one, if you're like you said, a hands-on learner, you really need to do it as you learn, because that's how you figure it out. So doing it this way gives you sort of like a little insular moment where nobody else is whispering in your ear about how to do things, and you can figure it out.
Totally. And I think it was a great moment, not just for Bog Bean, but for me as a player, that I don't know, there's that tie to the world and like the lore in a different way. Yeah. Knowing, I guess, like, or having a more close relationship to this, like, I guess, political figure, for lack of a better term.
That's a pretty good way to put it.
But like, you know, it cements things a little more, and it makes things a little more real, versus like, because it's an easy crutch almost to be like the slapstick haha character, but this helped me kind of like ease into like, no, like, let's take this seriously.
I can grow. I don't have to stay this way.
And so I love, like, especially online, I do enjoy the trope of like the silly character becoming like it's serious in its own way, and I love
the
that.
moment.
I love that I can kind of take part in that.
Where it's like, but then they're able to like still revert back to their old personality.
They still have
they don't lose the fun in them.
Yeah,
totally.
They just grow up a little bit.
Yeah, and like a big thing too was also kind of me allowing you to essentially, which you don't realize, is pseudo subclass. As this was also when you started gaining maneuvers,
right?
Which are typically from the battle master of the fighter.
Yep.
And so it was another way to kind of give, because in our homebrew, like now, you know, anybody can learn better sword techniques and stuff like that. And later on, you guys all get to learn more. But it was really using you as the tester to start with that, and also giving you as a new player slowly more stuff to give you kind of more actions and more ways to like engage with the enemy or in combat.
Especially with all us legacy players having our own little special thing going on, we wanted to give the new players something fun to have.
But I mean, this is obviously a funny thing and is very unique. Was there much jealousy amongst the Bog Bean increase in strength to the Captain V increase in strength?
Oh yeah, was there infighting in the household?
No, not really. It's actually funny because we got this question a lot at the time. In the early game, we weren't talking too much about
that is
the game
true.
at all.
Don't talk to me.
It was very much like, we're still new, we're figuring it out. We don't know how to feel about these stats and our characters.
We're not friends yet.
Yeah, it was very much like, what's to talk about? But then as the story moves on, of course, and we get more acquainted with the game, now we talk a lot more about it. But I'm sure there were some like jokes and some like chiding remarks, like haha.
Where it's like haha, you had to be in the spotlight. It's like, well, wait, I want new abilities.
Yeah.
Wait, what? How do I get that?
You can use your sword better now?
Look what I can do.
It lights up.
Now, obviously, at Link, you were kind of the major player in this, but Luna, you were there. D&D wife, you were there as well. Was there any kind of major questions you guys had as players that you wanted to have anything answered? Obviously, I know D&D wife, you weren't quite a part of this scene.
I wasn't, but it's really interesting because, we, at least Luna, I don't think has had a sort of solo battle moment yet. So it's interesting because it informs you possibly what it might look like in the future, just maybe a little more scaled up. So.
How about you at Link? I mean, obviously you being the center of the focus in this scene.
I've always wondered, like, in those kind of moments, like, what happens if I absolutely fail or absolutely, like, refuse to go in the direction that you've kind of guided me towards?
Like, the direction thing is
will he
easy.
railroad or will he not?
Well, the direction thing is easy because I don't have one. Like, it is whatever you do. It's like, I have, like, contingencies, so it's, like, obviously, and the contingencies are usually for, like, the obvious, right? So, like, you can plan out a definite no, you can plan out a definite yes. But in between there, you just got to be kind of loosey-goosey. So if you straight up failed, obviously this is like inherently a training thing. And the big thing too is that you have been told no blood is to be spilled in the area. So the idea is like, It would have been more of like the fade to black. You end up like tossed back at camp, and you gained nothing.
Roughly bandaged and tossed away.
The bigger consequence with that is the loss of that connection, and which we know later on in the story, as we are recording this much after we had this session, it becomes a major factor. So really what is to think about that now and be like, hey, what if you had zero interaction with this character and they now disdain or hate you?
That would have been so much harder to work up our like relationship. Like thinking about that as you say it. Oh my God.
So it also would be you wouldn't have also gained any of that extra background information about Hebe or the sword, the Saturn sword, or anything like that.
Nothing. We might not have even gone to the Tabaxi tribe when we did.
That's the thing is and that's what I love about D&D in that these little kind of things that can happen, and then so you can play for those definites, but really if you want. And really, I was like, well, she has any way of solving this. It was more of the player, but it was, like I said, it was more about boxing you in a little bit. So it's like, okay, you're in this one location. It's one enemy. Figure it out. It's not like you're being attacked 100 times and death is in 2 rounds.
It's not 10 people around you.
And so it was, but I had to still obviously make it feel like, you could lose.
Yeah, totally.
But it was really yours to lose.
Yeah.
Because this is still, like we were talking, this is still the prologue of the story. Like, we haven't really entered the real...
It's a tutorial.
Yeah, right? And so it was really, the biggest focus was teaching you to just kind of assess the situation and not just go running in and just kind of scratching the first thing you see. And not thinking that that's the only thing you can do.
Yeah, totally. And I think it has helped, like, in the future where Bog Bean accumulates more of her, like, mutations and different maneuvers. Still struggling with the maneuver thing just because I'm like, oh, yeah, I can do that. Or, like, after the moment passes, I'm like, oh, my God, that qualified for my maneuver, whatever.
Yeah.
But, no, I think stuff like that, like, it definitely helps. And it translates to a ton of other mechanics within the game.
And I think times where like, you as Entling, you're like, oh, I forgot something. It just plays into Bog Bean's mentality and fighting style where it's like, where she had an opportunity and she misses it, and the next time she's like, oh, I can do this now, and then she actually does it. It really fits into, because she's not this battle-hardened warrior yet.
Not yet.
That is the one stroke of genius that I will take credit for instead of shy away from, is making Bog Bean as new as I was. So it's like, okay, any mistake I make, that's so in character for her.
Which is funny because given your significant other, his character had more of a, I know a lot of things, I have this reputation, I'm Captain V, the poisoner, and so it's like, it really is funny. So he had to deal with a lot different instances, being that he was a know-it-all character instead of a know-nothing character like Bog Bean.
There's a lot more to protect when you know everything.
Well, as always, what for the two of you would you call for is the best or the one highlight of the scene we are talking about today?
Probably that initial blow. I thought that was hilarious.
You took
a punch. Sorry, this is the best.
It's okay.
It's my favorite too. It's like my favorite too because I feel like it's like it was such a moment where it's like, it's because to me, rolling for initiative is such a boring ass moment because it's like, okay, roll for initiative. I'm like putting pieces on the table. It's like 10
Everyone's
minutes
doing
or
math.
so.
No, it's the anime thing where the guy is giving a 10-minute monologue.
Right.
And it's like, why aren't you hitting him?
The battle started 10 episodes ago.
Because it was like, there's no initiative. She went first.
They said training started.
Yeah.
And so
you said yes.
Yeah, and it was also kind of like that opportunity is also, I wanted to see if Bog Bean would strike first, if Bog Bean was going to take it super literal.
Yeah, the initiative.
Where it's like, the training starts now. Oh! And just starts going.
Wailing on her.
So it was like, she struck first.
Oh,
true.
But I think that is kind of funny, is that is like the selling point of that scene.
I think it was the best. It really sets the tone for everything.
Plus, if you think about it from a visual, like, Hunza's like 6'1".
Yeah, it's a Bog
Which means she like came down with like this Ryu Shoryuken style, like low to the ground.
She knelt
and, like,
down.
Picks up Bog Bean off the ground as she's like uppercutting
That's exactly
her.
how I imagined
She
it.
knelt down, put her hand on your shoulder.
Yes,
and
it's like,
sucker
okay,
punched
training starts now. And then jump back. It started. Oh my gosh.
But no, I think that is the awesome way to do it. But that is a wrap for today's episode of the Traveler's Chronicles. Bog Bean's first solo adventure was a wild ride, and we can't wait to see where she goes next.
A huge thanks to Entling for joining us tonight. And remember, adventurers, if you enjoy the show, be sure to like, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Always a blast being on, you guys. And don't forget to check out the Discord. We love hearing your theories, and we post fan art. We promise we won't make you guys run laps in the treetops.
And next time we'll be covering some major events that is going to be coming up, which is the grand reveal of the master plan of Matthias in the Tournament of Strength. So do not miss out, as that is where our story is finally going to pick up, and we exit the prologue and enter the real story of Extraeus.
Yep, the end of the tutorial. Until next time, adventurers, keep rolling 20s.
And don't let the demons bite.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, listeners, for joining us on this episode of the Traveler Chronicles. We hope you enjoyed your journey through the world of Extraeus and the adventures of the travelers themselves. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe to our podcast. Your support helps us continue to bring the magic of Extraeus to life. Want to be part of the story? Join our community on Discord, where you can chat with us and the travelers themselves. Share your own adventures and dive even deeper into the world of Extraeus. Don't forget to check out our videos on the Couple of Nerds YouTube page for even more content, including behind-the-scenes looks, painting tutorials by DNDWife, and so much more. Thank you for being a part of our adventure. So keep rolling those dice, and may your journeys be filled with wonder and excitement. Till next time, on the next episode of the Traveler Chronicles.